Hi, and welcome to You Heard It Here. I'm Philip Guerra, and my guest today is Diana Montoya Quintanilla. She is a person who is about to tell a story that is just remarkable because what's going on in the Fort Detrick right now is a lot of stories about cancer clusters and contamination, but what you haven't heard is more of the history, which her husband and her were living on the base when, at the time, that Fort Detrick was being used for biological weapons research. Ms. Quintanilla Montoya discovered that she had been an unwitting victim of the United States biological weapons program while she was married to her late husband, Sergeant First Class Thomas D. Montoya. He was a communications technician, teletype repairman at the East Coast Relay Station in Frederick, Maryland. Uh, Ms. Montoya, welcome to the program. What I wanted to kind of start off with is to let people know a little bit about what was going on there. This was a program that was started back then in order to what the Army was saying is to combat, the use of biological weapons on us. But then we built a place that was going to supposedly was supposed to help defend us against those things. But there was more going on there than what we thought. Is that correct?
Correct.
Mm.
Um, the Fort Detrick in those days, in 1967, was opened against the advice of the United Nations Security Council because of the dangers of the open air testing of chemical and toxins. And 2 months after they told them not to open it, then President Lyndon Johnson decided to open the Biological Warfare Center, and that was also being used as the East Coast Relay Station there at Fort Detrick. And my husband was a teletype repairman there, and they opened up that biological warfare center, and I had to live within a few feet of the greenhouses where they were experimenting with the herbicide, probably Agent Orange and others. And I was exposed when in the East Coast relay station, some scientists decided to put the toxins through the air ventilation system, the air ducts, and that's where I and my husband and several hundred other men got exposed there. And all of this was done against the rules of the Geneva Conference in 1925. All of this was done without our knowledge, without compensation, without our permission, and it was declassified in 2007 when the United States Department of Defense realized that everybody had died that was in the relay station. Everybody but myself. I did not work there. I was just the wife of a military man, and I had several miscarriages, and I'm disabled because of it.
So there was a situation in which people were not allowed on the military base because this was a top secret military base. This was an operation that was designed to for our national security, obviously. There were, as far as what we know, as we've been able to research the subject, there were voluntary human test subjects who were exposed to various toxins here. She and her late husband were used on further testing of chemicals and toxins without their knowledge. Now, when you say without your knowledge, how is it that you found out later, or was it later that you found out? I mean, how is it that you came across the knowledge that this happened if this happened without your knowledge?
While I wasn't living there in the very beginning, but then I moved on base, and at the East Coast Relay Station, the first time I noticed a cloud of smoke, pink smoke like glittered smoke coming out of the front door of the relay station. And I kept on asking, what's that coming out of the building? And what's that cloud coming out of the building? And they did not want to give me an answer. Finally, they got tired of me and they referred me back to the sign that was at the front entrance of Fort Detrick. They would say, don't look, don't ask, don't take pictures. What you see here stays here. And because of that threat, my husband and I decided to stop asking about what was coming out of the building or what was coming out of the air conditioning vents, because a lot of different toxins were coming out of the air conditioning vents. Of course, then we didn't realize that there were toxins. I could never have imagined that the United States Army or the United States government would be deliberately exposing me to these toxins. I was really the victim of sabotage.
Well, that's a strong word. Well, why do you feel that you were sabotaged? I mean, that sounds like there was something deliberate or sinister going on in there. Now, I mean, a lot of people, dismiss conspiracy theories, and a lot of people say that, hey, that, they couldn't possibly be doing that. Yet, we're looking at the evidence of a contaminated soil right now. There's just a lot of reports coming out of Frederick, Maryland, which is a real pretty much across the fence from the base. I mean, one is Camp Detrick, and then the other is then what is Frederick, Maryland, and I mean, there's housing for people that I mean, right close to the base that was in that time. So there's cancer clusters being developed and stuff that. If I understand correctly, when you were preparing for this program, you were talking about how this was something that was opened up, or the military opened up, the army opened up against the advice of the spirit of the Geneva Convention in 1925. But there was other warnings. Where did those come from?
The International Committee of the Red Cross under humanitarian law, this is not allowed, and this law was partly constructed by the United States government. Any person that gets contaminated under the humanitarian law, any person that gets contaminated must be compensated, must be treated within 6 months of contamination. And I was pregnant during that time, so any female that is pregnant also gets double compensation under the rules of the international humanitarian law. And the United States government didn't abide by any of the rules of the Geneva Conference or the Red Cross.
So it seems like the United States sat on this for a while, meaning they didn't do anything. The one who originally opened the facility was President Johnson. Is that right?
Yes, and it was closed by then President Richard Nixon, realizing and knowing that it was being investigated, that they were violating the rules of the Geneva Conference. President Nixon decided to close down all of the Biological Warfare Center in November of 1969. By that time, I had already left. My husband and I had already left and come back to San Antonio. We didn't know we were contaminated at that time.
So in the end, what's going on now is that there is evidence of contamination in the soil and the water. But prior to this, they were told that there was inherent dangers in opening such a facility, right?
The open air testing was that they were advised not to open it because of the open air testing. They could not control the open air testing of this biological warfare center. So the United Nations Security Council, of which the United States is part of, voted for us not to open it. And within 60 to 90 days after they were told not to open it, then President Lyndon Johnson decided to go ahead and open it. And that's when I and my husband got there.
Yeah. Well, what's going on is that I mean, unlike the intentional exposure, and when you say intentional exposure, at the East Coast Relay Station, you were saying that there were things going on at the facility where your husband worked. Now, this we have to point out that the East Coast Relay Station was where they could communicate, right? They were communicating out to other parts of the military, right?
There was a communication depot from the war. The things that were going on in Vietnam was coming from Vietnam to South Korea, and from South Korea to the East Coast Relay Station, where my husband was, and then from the relay station on into the Pentagon.
So that was a building that was completely and totally separate, not even involved, not directly involved. It had nothing to do with the Biological Warfare Center, and yet you said you saw clouds of toxins or colored clouds, and then you said something about your husband. Tell me about your husband, what he was saying.
Oh, well, he was working there, and he started complaining about itching on his arms, on his face, and he decided even in the summertime to start wearing long sleeve shirts to avoid being contaminated, because whatever was in the air and coming out of the air vents in the ceiling of this East Coast Relay Station was causing him a lot of itching, and causing him to get very big, heavy boils on his face. Everywhere that he was uncovered, he was exposed.
I see. So, and then you were going through all kinds of illnesses and situations with illnesses. We're coming up on a hard break. We'll be opening up the phone lines when we come back. Stay tuned and stay with us. I'm Philip Guerra.